You've probably heard it a million times right that capitalism just works, all thanks to some invisible hand. But what if I told you there's another hand, a much more visible one, that's been shaping the game all along? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that common story and find out how our economic world is really put together. You know the drill. In the public debate, it's always this epic showdown. In one corner, you've got the free market, this incredible engine of innovation and prosperity. And in the other corner, you have the government, usually painted as the fun police, bogged down in red tape and regulations that just get in the way. It's this constant tug of war. But is that really what's happening? Is that the whole story?
And this idea often gets traced back to the big guy himself, Adam Smith. This quote really sums up that stripped-down view. The thinking goes, government just needs to provide the basics: peace, justice, low taxes, and then get out of the way. Let the market work its magic. And that has become a core belief for so many. But it might be a huge oversimplification of what even Smith himself was talking about.
Okay, so first up, let's really unpack this story we all know so well. You know, the classic tale of the market versus the government. It's the narrative that frames pretty much all of our political debates. So, in this version of the story, the characters are pretty clear-cut. The market, guided by that mystical, invisible hand, is the hero. It's dynamic, it's efficient, it magically turns everyone's self-interest into the best possible outcome for all of society. And government? Well, it's usually cast as the bumbling outsider that just messes things up, slowing everything down with its rules. It's a really simple, powerful story, but maybe it's a little too simple.
Right, so now let's pull back that curtain, because the real story of how our markets work is actually way more interesting. To get it, we have to stop looking at the players and start looking at the real rules of the game.
This analogy is, frankly, a game changer. I mean, think about it. You can't just have a game of football without a rule book, right? Without referees to call fouls, or lines on the field, or a league organizing the whole thing. If you didn't have that structure, you wouldn't have football. You'd just have chaos. Well, guess what? Markets are exactly the same.
In the absolute foundation of this whole market game, it all comes down to property rights. But here's the twist. Property rights aren't really about your relationship with your stuff. It's not about you and your car. It's actually about the set of rules that governs the relationship between you and everybody else when it comes to your car. It's a purely social invention.
So what do we even mean by ownership? Well, a great way to picture it is as a bundle of sticks. Each stick in the bundle is a different right. You've got the right to control your property, to use it how you want. You have a claim to its value. You have the absolutely crucial right to exclude other people, to say, hey, this is mine, not yours. And of course, the right to transfer it, to sell it or give it away. This bundle is what makes a market even possible.
And here is the absolute key. Where does this bundle of sticks come from? Does it just fall out of the sky? Of course not. It is designed, granted, and, most importantly, enforced by a political authority, by the government. Without the government creating these rules, you don't have stable property rights. And without stable property rights, you can't have a market. So you see, the government isn't just interfering in the game, it's setting up the stadium, drawing the lines, and handing everyone the rulebook. Without it, there is no game.
Now, this might sound a little abstract, so let's make it incredibly real with a massive example. We're going to look at the wild roller coaster of financial regulation in the US because, wow, does it show how changing the rules changes everything. Okay, so picture this. After the devastation of the Great Depression, the government stepped in and, in 1933, built a giant firewall called the Glass-Steagall Act. It separated your everyday Main Street savings bank from the risky, high-flying world of Wall Street investment banking. For over 60 years, that was the rule. Then, in 1999, Congress came along and just demolished that wall. And what happened less than a decade later? Boom, the 2008 global financial crisis. So, what did we do? We had to write a whole new rule book, the Dodd-Frank Act, to try and build some of those walls back up.
This timeline just lays it all out there. The story was never government versus no government. It was always government is setting the rules. The only thing that changed was what the rules were. At every single point, government was making fundamental choices about what kind of market to have, and the fate of the entire global economy was hanging on those choices. So if that famous invisible hand isn't the only one pulling the strings, what else is going on? Well, this leads us to a much more complete and, I think, a much more useful way of understanding how all this works. The reality is, a healthy system needs two hands working in tandem.
You've got the invisible hand of the market, that's the price mechanism, supply and demand, all that good stuff that coordinates activity within the rules. But you also need the visible hand of government, the political authority that designs, modernizes, and enforces the rules in the first place. You simply cannot have one without the other.
And this visible hand actually plays two different parts. First, there's the administrative role. That's like being the referee on the field, just enforcing the current rules of the game and blowing the whistle on fouls. But there's also a second, entrepreneurial role. That's more like being the league commissioner. The commissioner has to look at the big picture and say, hey, technology is changing the game, or we have a problem here we need to fix. They have to proactively modernize the rules to keep the whole system working.
So, this brings us all the way back to the beginning. If we go back and take a harder look at Adam Smith, the supposed poster child for the hands-off approach, we find something pretty surprising.
You might think of Adam Smith as being totally pro-business, but listen to this direct quote. He basically warns that whenever business owners get together, even just for fun, they're probably going to end up scheming against the public to fix prices. The man was nobody's fool. He was deeply skeptical of unchecked corporate power.
And here's another one. He points out that employers are basically always in a constant and uniform combination to keep wages from rising. This is not a picture of a perfectly self-regulating system that benefits everyone. Adam Smith himself saw these power imbalances and understood that you needed some kind of countervailing force to make the game fair.
And that brings us to the core takeaway of this whole explainer. The debate about market versus government is a complete distraction. It's a false choice. The government is always involved because it's the one that writes the fundamental rules of the game. The real questions, the ones we should all be asking are, how are those rules being written? Who gets to influence them? And ultimately, for whose benefit is the game being played? So the next time you're in a conversation and you hear someone arguing for more government or less government, just remember that football game. The real issue isn't how thick the rule book is, it's about who gets to sit at the table and write the rules in the first place. The most important question isn't more or less, it is, and always has been, whose rules?